It is definitely part mystery, part obvious for the fact that DZBT07 is actually one of the most profitable booster in the Vanguard history in recent years, but at the same time it is also one of the least meta affected booster that I have seen.
Emotional, damn it!
There are some new entry decks that did enter into the sphere, and some of the decks did get a huge improvement to an extent that I consider them to be one of the meta threat, but I would say most of them are not at the level where it actually threatening the big three anytime soon.
Are you sure about that?
But how good exactly are they? Well, that is exactly what I'm gonna be talking about today, and for those who are here for the first time, welcome. I normally cover topics from my first impression of the decks testing of those new cards, and of course tier list video. And if you are here for the first time, I have 3 particular rules that I kind of use it as a guideline. The first one is no collab nations, in particular with the one that has way too many decks for me to cover, except for a few in the recent time where I was able to kind of keep it up and they did get released in the booster. Otherwise, I would try to avoid those because there is simply not enough sample size for me to actually play it out. But one particular collab nation might be adding to the list soon. I hope it did not. Secondly, there will be a limited entry in the top tier, so S and A plus tier, where I'm separating a great deck from good decks, because a lot of deck in Vanguard right now, I would say, is in a playable state when you invest in it enough. It's just that there are some minor aspects that does need to optimize for those decks for it to actually be great, or at least not get hard counter by too many decks in the same tier. And last but not least is the experience. A lot of these experience are based on my playtest and my tournament experience, as well as exchanging opinion with my friends who are also quite a prevalent Vanguard players. So if you guys have a different opinion on it, do leave down in the comments below. We are open for a proper civil conversation. Oh, also I decided to do a spring cleaning on my tier list off screen. So if you do have any complaint about certain entry in the tier list that I clean up before discussing the main one, comment down below as well. And without further ado, this is a DZBT07 tier list, and we're gonna start off with Dragon Empire, the nation that I have to say I have a lot of both love and hate, because one of my favorite right line is actually in this nation, but unfortunately my luck testing these Dragon Empire decks has been leaning towards very bad. But regardless, we do have quite a number of supports, and we can start off with El Quiribra. Yes, the deck did get a little support that does get additional shield power and also blocking intercept just a little bit for El Quiribra. Overall, the card is not a bad update, as it doesn't have annoying condition to actually get huge amount of power, while also being quite easy to recycle without feeling too weird with it. But the only problem with that new card is that it's grade 3 lock, so you can't really rush well with it, and El Quiribra is one of those decks where you do need all your early rush to actually close the game properly. So because of that, completely no chance for El Quiribra, but it's still a very fantastic deck and deserve a position. So before we continue, I'm gonna declare this first because we did get a Viewbell Dragon, but as we all know, Viewbell will be getting additional right lines and support in DZBT08, so I'm gonna be skipping it for the next booster. And then we have Nirvana and to an extension Jiwa, as we did get a few cards for both of the support, with Jiwa get 1 extra support. Yes, the PR is more towards Jiwa, and to put it simply, Ao Pao is an amazing card. Like, it helped the early game of the deck in the fullest form, able to search for Nirvana, Talisman, and Trickstar, and at the same time it also gives additional power to Varena that was overdressed or cross overdressed, which is a nice touch and allow the deck to get early game a little bit better. And to make things even more interesting, Ao Pao is a Blaze Maiden, which also help with some unusual build like the fried chicken build that I have been building with Urger Varena.
Brother,
Yes, I am cooking that shit. The issue with Ao Pao though, yes, it still have an issue, is the fact that it is a Blaze Maiden, so it's synergized with the older support, but not with the newer one. And that kind of just boils down to the fact that she is not Prayer Dragon. A little bit like an issue with Archive Monster Searcher, where it doesn't share the original name of monster with other unit, allowing you to kind of extend it to it a little bit better. This one have a similar issue, and we do have very little space to actually put her in without compromising something else. And the same can be said with the brand new PR, which seems to work better with Jiwa because to call itself back from drop is extremely helpful. But like I said just now, there's so little space for Verena right now. And thanks to my spring cleaning, I will be assigning a new rank for both Nirvana and Jiwa, where Nirvana, the original, will be in D tier. I'm sorry guys, the deck just dead for real unless they are trying to revive the overdress mechanic properly. Meanwhile for Jiwa, I'm gonna put her in middle of A tier in a sense that the deck is good but does require a very good pilot to actually make the deck works. And then we have the support no one actually asked for, and that is Triumph, both version. No, God! And the Triumph we did get a few cards, but the most important one is the double R, Jokushu, which does have the original Triumph to turbo Triumph Dragon into Soul, allowing you to get not only just a pseudo personal right, but also additional crit from Strap Command Dragon. The only issue with the Triumph Dragon version for this card is the fact that it is a Vanguard situation where you still need to hard draw into those cards to actually do it properly, and at the same time, Counter Blast can be an issue with this deck quite a little bit, but other than that, it is a very strong unit. But Jokushu does have an issue, the fact that he needs to be in the front row. Because of that, this clashes with both Triumph and Grandpa Triumph, in a sense that Grandpa Triumph wants your front row to have both grade 3 so that you can make use of his ability to give intercept to those units, and also at the same time, you know, Triumph Dragon withstand. And at the same time, Triumph also want to strap command on the field just to pressure your opponent as much as possible. So Jokushu forcing himself to be in the front row is a little bit in the way. But regardless, it doesn't really make a huge change for the deck. So with the new ranking, I'm gonna be putting the Triumph, the original, in the bottom of B tier just because of that crit pressure. Meanwhile, for the Grandpa, I'm gonna put him in D tier. The deck just missing way too many pieces for it to work properly right now. And then we come to the main one, Bab Sabgra, my favorite right line from Dragon Empire and one of my favorite right line period. And you guys might be thinking, where exactly is Bab Sabgra? Well, let's list the good part about her first. Her new right line essentially improved the quality of life of how she can play arms by literally able to just search out 4 different bricks from your deck, allowing you to have a much better trigger to deck ratio, and at the same time, new form of buff give a huge amount of quality of life, making the deck able to arm themselves a lot easier, while also giving a little bit more resource like energy, allowing you to essentially optimize some of the effect, and that includes ability to overdress from drop as well. So a lot of beneficial comes from Artisaria upgrade, and on top of that, we did receive Yugamasha that allow you to essentially get a huge amount of draw and also being a restand, and so in front trigger, alleviating some of the soul issue that Bab Sabgra has for the longest time. The main issue with the brand new Bab Sabgra though is the fact that for one, it does still use quite a lot of resource. You still need to Soul Blast 2 for the additional crit and front row retire, and now you have more cost to actually consider, from more counter blast from Yugamasha to restand, small soul blast for Boldanat to get additional shield power, and you still keep some of the cards that does help you to get all these cards very quickly, like Divistia, to essentially ensure a huge amount of filter within one single shot. And on top of that, all of this has to be drawn. It is easy to search for arms and dress boost unit. It is troublesome to search for the dragon themselves, so that is that issue as well, especially me who for some unknown reason don't draw into Yugamasha during tournament often. But regardless, Bab Sabgra deserve a rank up, and this is one of the biggest leap in this video I feel, as she is sharing that S tier podium with the other 2 decks that has been dominating the Vanguard meta for quite some time now. Yes, I'm putting her in S tier. The deck still need a lot of setup, but the moment you set up right, everything just goes off. Simple as that. And it is safe to say the results agree with my analysis here, both from my personal experience and in the high level of competitive as well, despite the sample size might be a little bit too small. So yeah, Bab lovers, we are eating very well, which the same can't really be said to the dark states, cause I'm not gonna lie, this booster, as much as we received some great updates, we also received some very mid update that pissed me off. I mean, just look at Odium, who not only just get literally the exact same card, but at the same time got all the support around her. Not saying it is bad, but I feel compared to the level of quality or improvement in offense that Leridas received in one booster, I feel Odium was a little bit lacking, like genuinely. Especially considering that the grade 2 Anachronas that we received, you're not gonna be using that Soul Blast 2 for a draw that often because it will just compromise other aspects of your game overall. It does help, but it doesn't make the deck better. It just fixes some of the issue while making problems in another aspect of the deck. Especially one of the surprising issue with Odium, or not surprising, is the fact that the deck can get decked out very quickly, and now it deck out even faster. And on top of that, lock currently exists right now, so a lot of things have stacked on Odium quite a lot, but I don't think it is a bad deck. It is still definitely one of the strongest deck in the format, and that's why I'm leaving her in A+ tier, but I'm shifting her down to put it beside Blankmeyer. Counters, getting mid support, and on top of that, the main issue of the deck hasn't been really ironed out properly. It's just 3 ingredients for the recipe of ranking down. And unfortunately, Odium wasn't the only one that got caught in this crossfire, because there are a total of 3 more decks, and that's Osilages and Bruce. Osilages get Sagittarius, which is essentially a 5th attack extender for Osilages as a deck. But here's the thing, Rewinder J is already able to do 5 attack to begin with.
Hey yo, what the f?
Meanwhile, Osilages get an additional attack is not bad, but the cost that need to use for it is just too painful. Counterblast 1 is just too much for the deck already. Especially don't forget you do want to use Counterblast 1 every turn for the deck searching ability of original Osilages. So I wouldn't call it completely ruin the deck because it's still playable as it is. It's just that you now have more options if you want to extend into more attack. But otherwise, I'm gonna leave both of them right in the middle of B tier in front of Soliron. Meanwhile for Bruce, I mean,
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Kines was an incredible card to begin with, and then we get Grady. And for someone whose name has 4 letters of the word great, this card is a very shitty card, as not only it does nothing for violence, it also doesn't do much for violence, as back row intercept and Vanguard boost is just not a huge priority for the deck in general. Like, you can run it if you are missing Kines, but other than that, I'm not seeing the point of running this card at all. So because of that, there is no change to Bruce for both violence version, which is still in D tier, and violence version, which is in A tier. And then we have Diafudals. Yes, I know DZBT07 did not get the Diafudal support, but we did get a PR that is a set order somehow, but it is a very good set order as it helps you to search out early game for Diafudal pieces. And in case you do not have a 2 unit that you want to have in your soul, you can just use it as an emergency button to put it into soul. The issue with the new PR is that as much as it fixed one of the problems that I mentioned in the past with dolls, where the deck doesn't have a lot of searchability, this fixed the deck a lot. But I feel now the dolls has a new problem coming in the form of the fact that their defensive capability feels kind of power creep to an extent, in a sense that having a way to guard from bind zone is very nice and all, but now we do have 3 attack decks that doesn't really care on that, and even for a multi-attack deck, the number go up so much that getting 1 card from bind zone to guard only is just not enough. I feel Undraw need a revamp just a little bit, just enough to adapt into the current era of Vanguard. But the support is still incredible, so I'm gonna bring dolls up from low A- to mid A-. I do still think it is that incredible to get a rank up. It's just that, you know, plus 5k. And then we have the last unit we have to talk about for Dark State, and it is a unit that I put away intentionally because it is the biggest buff of the Dark State in this booster, and that's Astoria. Astoria got a brand new form in the form of Bygos, which bring the base of both Unica and Mars, while also having a way to guarantee persona and also a way to make her skill trigger much easier. So Stella definitely has brought a lot of benefits. The issue issue with Stella, in my opinion, is that it also increased the requirement of the deck quite a little bit, unless you are going second, where you can kind of turbos when all the cards align for you. Meanwhile, all of these benefits will also come at the cost of losing a lot in late game. Artisaria late game now, it just feels very underwhelming without the presence of certain cards. Yes, the deck has ability to revive back a unit now, but at the same time, I feel it is not enough, as most of the Artisaria support doesn't gain a huge amount of power with the exception of Phonograph. And then this is the biggest gripe I have with the deck. Bifrost just runs the deck. Like, if you do not draw Bifrost at all the entire game, you are fucked. Bifrost is the key to all the utilities that Artisaria can access, and not having that key just hurt the deck way too much. And that is why I am dropping Unica into mid B tier and jump ahead from the darkness into the space. Okay, hold up there, pal. Before we go into the moon, there is one deck I forgot to mention in the initial recording, and I decided to talk about it now, and that is Cerulean. Just to give a quick TLDR for those who haven't watched my video, Cerulean essentially plays around having a multiple normal order in your soul or in the bind zone, allowing you to essentially get additional restand with additional drive if your opponent is greater or greater, while also buffing your entire board. Her benefit come from her access to normal orders, in a sense that not only she can play it from soul, but the fact that you have to run so many of it, it also allows you to extend if you know what to do with certain order, with a good example being the Cage of Fury Star and Brawl You Insects. And this is on top of her Disciple Arias being a fantastic card that extends into another attack for you, while also helping you to search out for normal orders. So overall, I would say for our no right line boss, this is a fantastic card. And thanks to a certain seed, the deck also play a whole lot better thanks to the way the deck works, and some of the cards are treated as normal order as well. The problem with Stoicheia, at least for now in my opinion, it just boils down to the fact that there are a good number of orders in Dark State that is considered to be good, but not all of them are actually good or at least synergize with each other properly. And of course, the fact that you are stuck to one per order activation is still a little bit stings as well. But I do think the deck might have a potential as a rogue deck. I mean, consistent 5 attack that are not really scared of the more recent support and control, that is a good indication for some rogue tier deck. The deck do need just a little bit more offense for all of these benefits to actually pay off. But I know Bush Review not giving us chances for Dark State and give us a good order for this deck at all. In fact, I think the release of this deck has essentially sealed Dark State from essentially getting a good generic normal order already, because Bushiroad love to fuck with Dark States. Anyway, I have talked about Cerulean. Let's go back to the original recording. We have Brandt Gate, and finally we have something that is actually associated with Gate for once, with a brand new entry to the nation, Viceruger. Okay, I'll put it this way first. Viceruger as a base is not bad at all. A very good filter that does search a lot in a single instance, reminiscent of Love from the Collab, and then the deck can also hit a decently high number with the orders help, which I'll be honest, that's one of the most insane order to give to a brand new deck. And this has come on top of the fact that the deck does more or less give you everything that you need in the booster itself. The problem with this deck though is the fact that for one, if your Mooncase search fail, and that include the Viceruger retrigger, you are fucked easily.
That escalated quickly.
You are screwed if your Mooncase trigger fail, because not only it does compromise your trigger ratio in your deck, which is the only thing that the deck has going at the moment, but also the offense, because if you do not build your order fast enough, you don't have additional attack to actually pull it off. And to make things worse, the amount of resource you use and the hand size that you gain throughout the game is just not enough. Yes, the Wolf does help you to get early game draw if needed to, but it is far from enough considering the fact that it just counterblasts one draw. But there's a silver lining here, because we already know Viceruger will be getting additional Mystic in the upcoming booster anyway, so I would say the deck has a Levidras level of potential of becoming a great deck in the span of one booster, just purely because Yagumo is quote-unquote a final boss in the season 3 of Divines. But Viceruger is still shittier than Levidras on launch, so I'm gonna leave Viceruger in high C. As much as there is a potential that Viceruger become meta in one booster, the base is kinda lacking compared to Levidras in all fairness. And then the rest of the support for Brandt Gate is pretty good actually, like in all fairness, with the exception of one, and that is Impaurio, where Humongous is actually not a bad card because it serves as another way for you to drop cards early game, allowing you to essentially build up your auto mortgage much faster. Meanwhile, Radial is not a bad unit at all, as being a 15k booster will also help you to retire a rare card, which can come in handy especially in the current meta, where losing one card just kills certain deck completely. So both of the support are actually decent, but I do feel you need more than that for Impaurio to actually reach its proper glory. And don't forget, lock exists, so I think Impaurio needs a way to essentially get away from this as well, or at least generate another attack so that it doesn't lose to the mechanic like lock. So because of that, I'm just gonna drop Impaurio slightly to bottom of a tier. Yes, the deck can tank very well even against some of the base deck in the format, but the fact that the deck can't clap hard enough back at those decks, it just hurt the deck too much, especially these support are kinda okay only. But fortunately, after Impaurio, everything is kinda like a crescendo as we continue with the OG classic Honeybait from Brandt Gate, Prison. Prison received only one support, and that is Well Keeper, which in all fairness is an amazing card as it gives your opponent choice of either they lose the defense or you are defending Prison at full power. In a sense that this card gives your opponent choice of whether to prison that one card in their hand or prison two cards from that drop. And this card also gets additional power in the earlier part of the game as well. The only drawback with this card I would say is the fact that it needs EV3 to pay the cost, which does kind of clash with Citron just a little bit. But at the same time, if you don't really need the draw, this is a good perfect prison card. And some of you might think giving a choice to your opponent, they would just choose to buy from drop, but in the later part of the game, prisoning from hand might be a better choice because 2 prisons equate 5 to front row during the pure light turn. And in all fairness, I feel prison is one of those decks where even though it hasn't received a new form yet, it has been getting a lot of good cards that kind of optimized based on the original version of Syrup Snow. So with all that considered, I'm gonna put Prison in A tier above Black. I just feel like the deck is an epitome of the control, and on top of all that, it's just satisfying when you manage to pull it off. So yeah, Prison, unlike its name, it gets better over time, which is something I can't really say it for Astrum. Though to be fair, the bar for quick start deck boss are generally quite low. I do have to admit the new support are an incredible support, as it is literally on place boundary that also help you to fix one of the biggest issue that Astrum has for the longest time, and that is the fact that its 5 attack number is just dog shit. So this card literally fixed the issue for you. The problem with Astrum kind of just more or less similar to most of the quick start deck boss in the sense that their hand size tend to be really bad and their resource recovery is really poor even with the aid of one of the most broken resource recovery unit in the game. So Astrum is essentially a unit that does require a lot to put into play properly, but unfortunately doesn't bring enough to the table to actually improve. And because of the spring cleaning of my tier list, it stays SD even though it get moved up in C recently. And then we have a Vanguard. This is a very interesting deck to talk about in this booster, purely because the only support that the deck get is a single card, but that single card made so much difference for the deck to an extent that it actually improved the deck. That is rare in many of the legacy deck in Vanguard right now, in a sense that the brand new strategy card essentially fix the main issue of the deck. If you're going first, you will always guarantee a personal right next turn, but if you're already in the personal right, it guaranteed a way to transfer all the powers and criticals to the original avant-garde when you switch it back from right turn, and also maintaining all the skill as well. So this means that whatever thing you stack on avant-garde, it remains on avant-garde.
It's too much winning!
And that's one of the biggest flaw that the deck has, and this order fixes it all. I actually feel avant-garde is low-key a rogue tier deck. Yes, it is an overlord deck in the sense that you still need to drive check into all the cards to get a benefit, but it is such a rare situation where we get a card that fixes the core fundamental issue of the deck itself, and that actually improves the deck in the best way possible. And this brand new strategy is one of those cards, and that is why I feel Avant-Garde deserves a rogue tier deck, aka aka A- tier. And then last but definitely not the least, and that is a deck that I have talked about 3 times straight in a row despite it barely have a support, Elite Glimmer. So for this time round, Elite Glimmer did get a PR that does help to increase the consistency and kind of reduce the need of you relying on Moe Flash all the time, though you still rely on the card, but at least you have another card that help you to extend the skill of Elite Glimmer. But regardless, I feel, despite after all this time, I still feel I underestimate the deck. And despite understanding the deck list that many of the top player has won with, I still doesn't really put it in the best tier possible. So after being presented to a proper Elite Glimmer recently, I can safely say yes, this deserves an A+ tier. The Batman finally became the GOAT. It's about damn time. And in all fairness, another reason I had decided to put it into A+ tier is also the fact that I decided to take into consideration of the English format where there is no love. So the only thing that holded Elite Glimmer back from being a top tier deck in the Japan is finally gone. So Elite Glimmer is easily the top tier deck right now. So I want my tier list to reflect that, and that's why I'm talking about Elite Glimmer again and put him in A+ tier. Okay, we went through quite a gate of a roller coaster in a sense. Now let's move on to what I would call a constant a little bit, because I feel Keter did not get a huge dub this time round, like in general. Like a good example for this is Cerulean, who yes did get additional attacker, but I feel it's a similar situation with Oselages where your deck already capable of doing that, or at least has some way to do it. This is just a really raw and dirty way of extending the attack, especially for Cerulean who already have additional attack. So because of that, I don't think Cerulean is getting better. In fact, in the context of my current tier list, I'm gonna leave it in C tier. It's just playable and that's it. I know there are a few people who has been asking me about the Cerulean build and everything, but I think over time, despite having one of the strongest tech in the game, and that is board reviving, Cerulean just doesn't receive enough support as much as Raziel actually has. And speaking of Raziel, I'm just gonna get it out of the way. The support that he got is a filler slot, but it doesn't affect him whatsoever. He is still one of the best deck in the format right now, regardless of how much money you have to spend to fully build the deck, at least in English version. Is the new support for him actually usable? Technically yes. It's a way for you to get ready for Lyell skill if you still want to run Lyell in Raziel build, but other than that, I am not seeing much point for it. In fact, I feel that Triple R could have been both Raziel and Lyell support, and it would bring more value. You know, like Rosarium Fairy situation. Speaking of his level, let's move to Lyell Amorta, and the deck does get a very good support in the form of Raniel. I think that's what it's called.
One eternity later.
Sorry, Reliquio. Reliquio helped you to search for both Gup and Lyell, which essentially was the missing pieces that I feel was missing back in DZBT07, in a sense that Lyell has a potential to OTK you, but one of the biggest issue was the fact that the deck tends to struggle looking for Gup, at least initially before you search it with Lyell, and then Lyell herself for the divide skill. So now that the deck has a way to search for those cards, it does improve that OTK speed by quite a bit. But is it actually enough for the deck to go into rogue tier? I don't think so, but it is definitely one of the best B tier deck I can think of. It has a potential to get better, but I feel and I pray that Bushiroad will not butcher both of the Lyell in the future support, because she don't deserve it, man. And then we move on to the last two decks we can talk about, and that is Houndracer and Divine Sister, two of a brand new archetype for Keter Sanctuary. And let's start off with the Houndracer, the more budget version of the two, in a sense that the deck is actually a very good nod to the Dog Breeder archetype in the original version of Vanguard, and it does reflect it very well in its playstyle, with a very good early game pressure as long as you have most of the human card in your hand, and it does have some fun interaction with High Beast and to an extension Energy strategy as well. And this haven't taken into account of the possible future high beats that we're gonna be getting in DZBT08. But the problem with the deck at the time is the fact that it doesn't have enough power when you don't pull the trigger or have a full board, and that full board had to be in a specific way, in a sense that in front you need to have a Hound Racer humans, and in the back row you need to have a high beast, which lead to the second problem of split archetype, in a sense that the deck is very good at searching for high beast. It is terrible at searching for Hound Racer themselves. Aside from the grade 2 skill, you have no other way to search for Hound Racer card, which I feel in the future that might be the support that the deck get, which will definitely improve the consistency of the deck by a whole lot. And last but not least, the deck has no space for counter charge. Like, you technically can run it, but I feel like you rather run some other card for the counter charge, especially considering you are having two different archetypes to juggle and to search out for. So despite how fun the deck can get, the weakness of the deck hold the deck down enough, but not enough for it to become a throw deck, as I think it is decent enough to be in mid B tier, right in front of Cerulean. And then last but not least, we have Divine Sister, who interestingly enough has opposite issue with Hound Racer in a way, where like it is a very decent boss unit, like consistent search, consistent restand and everything, and on top of that a good number thanks to Aros College's ability to buff those restanded Divine Sisters. The problem with the deck itself is I feel the archetype is kinda shit. Like, genuinely, a lot of the Divine Sister are part of the very powerful engine, but everything else feels all over the place and don't really mesh well with the playstyle of the deck, or at least Aros Colleges in general. So I think the deck just need a few more Divine Sister that does play into the playstyle, and that should fix a lot of the issue that the deck has. But for now, I am gonna leave Divine Sister at the top of C tier behind Flagberg, and then we move on to probably the shortest nation entry in this video, and that is Stoicheia, as there is generally 3 main decks to talk about.
Let's see how it takes for me to realize there's actually 4 decks to talk about.
But let's start off with one of the most hype archetype I think I have ever seen, Argo Siren. Aquaforce Mermaid archetype has been around for years. Many people wanted to see a boss version of this group of archetype, and after more than a decade of waiting, we finally get it. And it is actually quite good, all things considered, as it has no problem in setting up for most part, thanks to its ability to consistently filter for not just the order but also the Argo Siren themselves, something that I would say Hound Racer lacks. And then the deck also have a slightly unusual access to Tier Dragon, which is not bad at all because you have some good tech choice under this race as well, including but not limited to Inlet and Tideline, which are 2 of the very powerful toolbox that most of the Stoicheia player will have at least some copy of. Unfortunately, this deck very similar to decks like Flamgy or Mars. The hand is very fake, and similar to Flamgy, the late game for this deck is very shorty because there's not a lot of power gaining on the side of your units. Like Calliope does buff your entire front row, but that's most of the time is turn 4 or turn 3 going second. So it essentially commit a grave sins for a deck that's supposed to rush. You need to go second to get a full skill of the deck. To be fair though, there are rush deck that can recover well going second, but it is sad to say Argo Siren currently cannot do it. So because of all these elements, I'm gonna put it right in front of Hound Racer in mid B tier. The deck is alright, I think it just needs a few more elements to really buff the deck properly. And I mean, in all fairness, for a deck that is full of waifu, it is pretty cheap. So it is definitely a good budget deck to actually invest in to have some fun with. Next up, we have Christopher, and this is a very interesting case in the sense that the new support is not bad, but it feels unnecessary in a sense that like the new support does force you to use this new card as one of the target for Christianos effect, which is something you don't really want to have it happen, as you rather call 2 Severin with Chris skill instead of doing that. And to be fair, we do have a lot more cards in stock Stoicheia that does keep the look consistent while still retaining the soul, and that includes the PR that they just get recently. So no change for Christopher, but since we just clean up our tier list, I'm gonna put Chris in high C actually, right behind all the deck that used to be in A tier. The deck just works, but I feel like you do heavily rely on milling a lot and you do not have enough card to support into that aspect enough, but that's just me. And then we have Levidras, and yes, this is a moment I realized there's supposed to be 4 topics, but I forgot about Levidras. Because the support is very similar to Rosario in a way that it is a very low impact support, but Pantherat is actually a good unit unlike Severin for Rosario, in the sense that it does help you to search for Levidras in the earlier part of the game, ensuring that you have the cost in your hand for essentially just generate multiple markers with Imperial. Other than that, there's nothing else much I can say. The deck more or less play more or less the same without huge change to the roster. So Levidras is still one of the best deck in the format, S tier. So yes, we finally have our top 3 for this tier list with Rosario, Babsakra, and Levidras. And then last but not least, we have, people might be calling it Rorowa support with the PR or Claudia support in general, but I feel when you look at the way each of new support has been wording, it just plain token support. The double out in the booster just doesn't do much, but I think the PR does have some use, because for one, you don't really need Rorowa Vanguard to actually trigger the skill. It's just that if you do run a glitter card in your deck, that does help you in a way. But I don't think the PR has a huge effect on the ranking of the deck in general, because despite helping the deck to search for the piece they needed, the way you need to activate the skill is just so damn awkward. And because of that awkwardness, it kind of counterbalance out all the good points it could have received. And that's why no change in all of the plan decks. And then we finally move into the nation no one give a damn about until recently. And that is Lyrical Monasterio, where we did get a support for essentially every deck that was released during Divines, except for the one that was introduced in the Lyrical Booster and Flamgy. And let's start off with Marlene. Marlene new support is a nice to have in the sense that it does extend your attack into 5 attack and it does improve the number quite a bit. The problem with Marlene though is that there is not really a good countercharge that play well into her playstyle, despite the PR actually fixing her countercharge issue a little bit. And similar issue with every other quick start deck we have mentioned so far in this video, hand size is just not good at all. It's just not good enough to sustain long enough for the deck.
And that's why she got demoted to D tier for lacking in resources.
And then I'm gonna jump immediately into the Divine Skill decks with Lycia Fire and Chris Rain. So I'm putting these two together because of the fact that we did get one very specific PR order that is designed specifically for Divine Skill deck, and that is High 5. It's an incredible card and technically you can use it in non-Divine Skill deck as well, but Counterblast one is a bitch, and the fact that you can skip Counterblast for both Lycia Fire and Chris Rain is a huge help. But I do have to say the card skill does kind of lean more toward Lycia in a sense that it play better with Lycia playstyle, considering you can just throw all the power boosts to either Vanguard or Abelina. Meanwhile, Chris Rain doesn't have as much of a use. But what about their own specific support? Well, Chris Rain got essentially better CR that is more expensive. Disappointed! But I feel it is extremely unnecessary because you do have Tor Mana. It is most likely like a one-off in case you don't draw into Tor Mana. So Chris Rain received no change, and for me, Chris Rain is a rogue tier deck. With a right pilot, it will shine. It doesn't shine as well as Jiwa, but I think in the right hand, Chris Rain can tank extremely well and can hit extremely hard when the player plan the game properly. And meanwhile, for Lycia Fire, the new support is not a bad support at all. I mean, it helped you to play during the one turn, which is really nice. But I feel despite all the quality of life support that Lycia Fire has, the deck just performing worse and worse over time, especially considering it is one of those decks that can easily get controlled and explode easily. I feel the deck just need a good way to just re-trigger the skill instantly, like give us a way to do a proper 5 attack with Lycia Fire, or give us a way to stack more power onto Lycia Fire without causing arm and leg, that would help the deck a lot. And yes, I said earlier the PR does fix the issue for the deck. It is not enough, and because of that, I'm dropping Lycia into high B, but not like at the top of B, like in the high percentile of B. And then I decided to keep this the last because there is a lot to talk about this deck, but I will try to go through it as objective as possible. And that is the unit that everyone were excited for, Artisaria. Artisaria at a glance looks like a bad deck, and to be fair, there is a legitimate reason why people see it that way. The flaw of sound system is just so shit in the sense that it simply kills all of the advantage Artisaria could have gotten, but surprisingly enough, it doesn't feel bad. Yeah, it is a very strange feeling because despite all that, the deck does have a great boss with multi-attack, can increase the power of the front row and the critical to actually maintain your pressure. And this is on top of the fact that you do have Megaromania, which help you to enable lock, and sound system themselves are generally quite easy to play. Aside from the EB2 from Artisaria effect, you're not needing any other card skill. And if you have all the critical power, the deck perform very well. And surprisingly enough, the deck also does scale decently into late game. It's a very weird feeling and a very weird deck to playtest because I was the one who actually experienced this weird feeling myself. Like against a deck that does struggle against the Artisaria control, the deck just goes off. But against a deck that doesn't scare of Artisaria as much, the deck does struggle a little bit. But I don't think Artisaria deserves to be in B tier. It deserves to be at least in a rogue tier, just purely because of the fact that it counter 80% of the deck playstyle in standard, and that is multi-attack. So yeah, definitely a low-key rogue tier deck. Finally, we are at the last part of this video where I'm talking about the nationless unit or the collab nation. So let's get the nationless one out of the way first before we talk about a specific collab deck, and that is our plant dragon Cerulean. This card does improve some aspect that Grifogilla has initially, in a sense that it does have a better early game. It does have a better way to speed up the setup compared to Grifogilla, but I personally don't feel it is worth the sacrifice of guaranteed OT and restand unless you are Dragon Empire, because of the fact that this better early game and essentially extra dive and all the extra energy is not a proper win con. It's a huge resource bomb, and that's about it. Meanwhile, for the other version of Cerulean minus the Dragon Empire,
CPRO is kinda shit in other nations in comparison, and to makes things worse.
despite being considered playable, it doesn't really have an identity for itself. The same goes for Grifogilla, but at least Grifogilla does have some gimmick, and that is guaranteed over trigger. So because of all that, I'm putting Cerulean above Grifogilla. It is better than Grifogilla in my opinion, but the lack of wincon also harshly brought down all the advantage that Cerulean bring to the deck. And like I said in my video, what a fucking irony.
So what if the AI that is the cause of the whole plot in the build race actually flipped the script and decided to go for more optimized version of his deck for the sake of freedom?
Anyway, we can kind of put the Cerulean aside because these last two topics gonna interest a lot of people because it is the return of Ebisu.
Something's not right here.
So let's go through Ebisu real quick, and the reason why I decided to bring in Ebisu into the argument here is because of the unban. The unban, in all fairness, was a huge boost for her. It brings back the consistency piece that she was missing for years since her ban. So the deck is a lot more consistent now. And to be fair, I think the deck does age surprisingly well, thanks to her ability to consistently power down your opponent to 8k, meanwhile also having a way to guard from your monster box, which does help a lot. The problem I feel at the time of recording is that Ebisu did not get any other support since then, and it kind of shows because the deck is not able to really tank against the top tier deck right now because there are more than 3 attacks that are able to hit like a truck in the current meta, and Ebisu defensive ability from her own skill is not enough to keep up with the current power level of the standard. And on top of that, due to how she was designed to be balanced in the older format, she needs Persona Right to push. Without her Persona Right, her number dropped drastically despite the ability to reset the number multiple times, and because of that, I can only keep Ebisu B. As much as it was actually a decent deck when it was just unbanned,
Once
DZBT07 drop, it completely wiped it out of the existence. But does that affect Morphonica? So just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna mention the grade of each of the new Morphonica decks in general, but I'll put the final result as a combined grade, where each version of different Morphonica does have its own plus and minus, where the new Mashiro Forte is the most flat out of the 5, as the deck is essentially Magnolia with better numbers and better board recursion as well, but it does have a drawback of needing multiple Mashiro in your hand to ensure that you have ability to redirect the attacks on top of being able to maintain the triple drive. But you can get away with one solution, and this solution is also the biggest issue with the deck, which I'll come through later, as all other decks also have the same issue.
That escalated quickly.
Anyway, Togo has a great aggro from the multiple wriststand that doesn't really need a discard to actually get the skill aside from the Persona Blast skill, but the deck also has the least amount of filter, so you do have to pray that you draw into all the pieces that you need, or you draw into Rui to help you to mill Togo at least, so that you can have an easy board generation. Meanwhile, Rui is, at least in my opinion, best payoff out of the quote-unquote training 2 playstyle, as once you hit the desired condition, the deck is just a consistent 4 tier that also generates a lot of power, but it does force you to run multiple music that is literally a brick in your deck. But because of the fact that you are focusing on milling, your deck doesn't suffer too much because you are compressing all the time, so that wouldn't be a huge issue.
Shut up, simp.
Then we have Nanami, the most interesting one out of the 5. Because of the way her ability is text, you literally have a Vanguard that is easily one of the hardest to break over, because Nanami music gave a skill to Eureka to give the trigger power to your Vanguard. So essentially, if you check over triggers, you literally replicate Obidantaras or Obidantaras easily. I think that's how the name is being said, right? Anyway, I haven't even talked about the fact Nanami also can pull Wanaganda skill, where you can literally check your top deck before you actually drive check. So most of the Vanguard attack in Nanami is a PG check. The only drawback, of course, 3 attack for a very obvious reason. And then last but definitely least, we have Futaba, which is the least strong in my opinion, because of the fact that the deck relies on keep recycling your Futaba from your drop, and it just feels like a Mashiro light but a lot more worse.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
And all these decks could get their issue fixed to an extent if you chose to run the Morphonica crits of the respective boss you did. And this is where it gets very frustrating, at least for Japan people. If you want to play Mashiro Forte, your deck will be at least $300 due to how ridiculously expensive Mashiro is. And I think the same can be said with other Morphonica members as well, even if it is not as bad as Mashiro. But if you are English player, I think you should be okay. Those cards go for quite budget after all. But where I am putting the new ranking for all of the Morphonica decks. So for Mashiro Forte, I'm putting it as a low-key rogue tier deck, because I feel against a right opponent, the deck just shine very well, and some of these decks does exist in the higher tier, but I feel it lost terribly to almost every other deck in that high tier also. So very similar case with the original. Meanwhile, for the training tools, if you put everything collectively, it's a C. I would put Nanami as a B, Rui as a B as well, but because of Futaba D and Togo C, it kind of averaged out to like C. So with all the rating combines and average out, I'm gonna put Morphonica in mid B. It's just playable, but I feel the new support doesn't really support the old one, and you can't really use the old one as much in the new one. So it is a bit like a Nirvana and Jiwa situation all over again. And that is the end of DZBT07 tier list. Like I said at the start of the video, if you do have opinion to talk about at a certain entry I do, including the one I did not mention in this video, do leave down in comments below, and I will try to answer as much as possible. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub and become a member for some cool perks. And this is Mac Megane, signing out.
Boom, boom, boom.